Jose, it's great to have you here today. To start off, let's just dump right into it. You know how I am. Let's just dive right in. Let's talk with folks about why you decided to run for city council. What motivated you?
Oof, good question. Well, before I do that, I also want to make sure I give you another special happy birthday shout out to Mr. D.Moss celebrating. I'm not gonna say which number it is, but we all know you still look like you're like in your 30s, bro. So happy birthday again, bro.
Appreciate that, man. I appreciate that.
And to answer your question, why did I jump into this race? It's a great question. And D, you know me very well. I've been around in the community for the last several years. To be honest, I've never really cared to be the face of anything. I've always liked to be the dude behind the scenes, just trying to do the work and trying to get it done. But it got to a point where you see the city you love, you see the potential, you see all the good things happen, good potential for good things to happen, but it's just not quite there. And I've been getting folks that have asked me for several years, Jose, you should run. And I'm like, nah, I like to be behind the scenes. But honestly, this time around, I just thought it was the right moment. I had a lot of different folks come out of the woodworks asking me to run, and it wasn't even on my horizon. Um, but it got to a point where like I can't really complain about stuff if I don't step up and try to do something about it, right? And the amazing thing about this one is that there are a lot of great people that are running. So I think it's a great thing that we have 21, whatever, however many we're at today, folks running. It shows that people still care. And I feel like, I've been doing things from behind the scenes for so long that I think it's time for me to step up in front and try to do something for myself, because usually, as you know, worked as an aide to the mayor, worked alongside you. I've also had the privilege of working for Governor Baker, and a lot of that is you kind of pushing their stuff and helping them. But this time around, I felt like I should be jump up in front of the screen, and so I'm in it.
Well, we happy you are. You're right. There's a very diverse field, 21 candidates running right now, which tells you that the democratic process still exists. A lot of folks feel as if they have or had not had a voice. And man, they're really speaking up now. I had the pleasure of interviewing a few candidates, which is really dope. And some of them are really about that life, and I love that. So let's talk you. Talk a little bit about when people say, okay, you work for the governor, you're an aide, that's cool, but what can you really do downtown? Talk about your experience navigating the process at Springfield City Hall when you were there.
I mean, you know how I used to work. I mean, I was the kid that asked a lot of questions. I, went around to different departments because I wanted to understand what the actual process of a resident coming to the city hall, what they actually went through, right? Not just like getting one person complaining, getting a response, but also like I want to know what that flow is from the point there. So I used to get around, introduce myself to different departments, and really learned about what it was that was going on. And over time, over the almost 4 years I was there, I got involved in a number of different things, from the Buy Springfield Now program, where we were able to help home buyers, particularly first time home buyers go through that process. But one of the things I definitely noticed was how you treated the constituents, right? The residents. I think that was most important. And one of the things I've always prided myself on is hearing the story and really, the customer service aspect at City Hall. And, you used to tell me all the time, you take way too much time with them, you take too long. And I'm like, but I gotta listen, to the whole story, right? I can't just like come in if somebody has one complaint. I'm not going to treat everybody the same. I'm going to treat everybody for their individual story. So what you get from somebody like me is somebody that's willing to listen, willing to learn about what the issues are, and then find out and research the topics and the solutions, right? I have some ideas of things that can be done, but there's a lot of great ideas and things that are happening in the community. And I think some of the answers are not going to be just from council candidates or from government officials, but from folks in the community that are actually doing the work. I think a lot of our answers to some of our problems can be found there. So
300%. So as we talk about the challenges facing the city of Springfield, let's jump in. Economic development, job creation are essential for any city. We know that.
yep.
So I'm curious, what's your vision for stimulating economic growth in Springfield, and how do you plan to attract new businesses while supporting existing ones?
I mean, I think the
as a
biggest no, I no, great first topic. I think the biggest thing I would love to see is an actual economic development plan that not only focuses on downtown, but focuses on our neighborhoods. I think a lot of what we've seen over the last several years has been focused on downtowns, and I think that's great. And we've gotten to a certain point, but I'd love to see some of our neighborhoods be involved. One of the things I really am interested in is some of the work that I was doing for Governor Baker, and I did started to do a little bit while I was at MGM, was the supplier diversity efforts. I think some of the work that I was able to do at the Gov's office, around high level policy of how do we break down some of these barriers that keep folks, particularly diverse folks, from being able to do business with the state, right? And we were able, I think it was last year, we were able to, working with Governor Baker and many of the different secretariats, is to have the governor come out with an executive order updating some of the supplier diversity stuff. But what that did was it gave teeth to prior goals. It's not just like, oh yeah, we want to hit these goals, but it's like, all right, how are we going to do that? We're going to invest in our supplier diversity office. We're going to expand that. We're going to take that from an office and made it its own agency. We gave that department more money to increase their staffing. And that staffing was able to have staff that did compliance. And we also required that every secretariat had a supplier diversity officer, amongst a whole bunch of things, including we put in the groundwork on the SDO, Small Business Advisory Board. So I'd love to see more work on that locally, in terms of making sure that we are working with folks that are from Springfield, make sure they have opportunities to do business with the city of Springfield. And I've had the pleasure to work with a couple of folks when I was at the state level. But that's one of the areas I think we can really invest in, and making sure that folks who have a business, have something to offer the city, have an opportunity to get in there. Obviously, there's always a lot of work that needs to get done around technical assistance with many of our small businesses. So I'd love to see more focus on that. But there's a lot of work already in that space being done by organizations outside of government, right? So government is a piece of it, but there are organizations outside of it. A lot of the work that the ABBP did, work that BECMA is doing, work with so many other organizations that are out there to help bring our small businesses or our micro businesses that are not quite there for some of the funding areas. How do we get them to there? And so I think we need to support more of those organizations that are doing that in Springfield and around Springfield. That's another area I think we can focus on. And I honestly think we need a marketing campaign to really market the city.
Agreed.
I think, one of the things I really would love to see for Springfield is more of a vision of what we can be. I think a lot of times when I talk to folks, particularly when I've knocked on doors or even in the past, you talk to people and they talk about what Springfield used to be like. Oh, back in my day, Springfield did this, this, and this. Oh, back, they always go back towards to the past. And I think that's great, right? We had the Federal Armory, and that stimulated certain things. And way back when, we've had certain things. But I think what Springfield needs is an identity and a vision for what we can be. And I think one of the things that I was able to see working at the state level was going to different communities and seeing what they're doing. I got to go to places like Lawrence, where they got heavy investment from like New Balance, and going to New Bedford and seeing how they're creating their identity because they're close to the water. The city of Worcester is the ultimate example of a city that went from 170,000 residents to over 200,000 residents. And they got a booming, in terms of restaurants, businesses. They got a new baseball stadium. Like, they're killing it. And they also have the rail that connects them to Boston, which is a huge important factor in that. And I think that's one thing I'd love to see connect to Springfield as well.
That's something I haven't heard throughout all of my interviews. So great stuff. Let's move on to the second segment. You ready?
All right, let's do it.
Housing. The cost of housing in Springfield is a concern for many residents. Homeowner tax, property tax, extremely high, major concern for the residents of Springfield. I'm still a homeowner, although I'm not there. And I do know that my taxes have increased steadily for 8.5 straight years. to the point where it makes mortgages unaffordable. So when you have people who live on a fixed income, it's kind of like, how do they continue to maintain their quality of life or their standard of living when their tax rate, their interest rate is set, their mortgage is set, but the taxes increase by a couple of $100 every year. For some
Yep.
people,
Yep.
$50 to $300 is the difference between whether or not I eat or keep my lights on.
Yep.
So housing, typically when we talk about affordable housing, we talk about people who are living in poverty. We talk about the undercurrent or the underbelly of the city. But I think at this point, we're talking about working class, middle class people who are living from check to check, and just one layoff or one job closing away from, living on the streets. So as a city councilor, how do we bring that back to the table and address the concerns of residents there? How do we bring that back down to City Hall, and how do you plan to address that?
No, I mean, outside of public safety, I mean, the housing, the cost of living is probably it's probably one of the biggest ones with public safety, right?
Yeah,
And that's an issue that is not unique to Springfield, right? It's not unique to Massachusetts. It's a nationwide problem, right? And so I think we've got to do a lot of work with our state and federal delegation folks to really see what we can do, what programs that we can take advantage of. That municipalities and state governments can take advantage of. But one of the things I really would like to see is a look at the zoning laws. How can we look at our zoning laws in Springfield to make sure that we make more opportunities for affordable housing units, right? I was reading an article the other day, and I think I don't know if it was San Francisco, but I was really looking into like, what are other communities doing? What are some of the innovative things? And some of these communities, they're looking at the zoning laws in terms of density, right? And in certain places, a place like Springfield, you need, I think, is a minimum of 5,000 square feet to create a home, right? How do we look at certain areas to either make that smaller, to fit more housing, different unique types of housing? But that was something that I definitely would love to look into, is the zoning laws. The other piece is we got to work with our developers that are coming in. We got a lot of folks that are coming in trying to build market rate, which obviously the city, at some point needed market rate, but we've got to find ways to do mixed income and work with our developers, particularly those that are getting tax incentives. How are you ensuring that we can have units in here that folks can actually afford, right? I think it would also be cool to include some folks, from the city in terms of the trades, and having them trained so that not only they can work on those buildings and learn skills, but also eventually get one of those units. But one of my biggest things that I'm a big fan of is home ownership. And I was lucky, actually, when I was working, alongside of you. I bought my house at 25 years old. And I was super fortunate, super happy to do that. But that was a by accident thing. I was looking for an apartment. But nonetheless, I was able to do that at 25 years old. And today, if I was 25 today, would I be able to do that same thing? Probably not. And so there are a lot of folks that are priced out. So we need to look at, strategies and ways to make sure that we have, affordable pathways to home ownership. When I was at the mayor's office, I was the chair of the Buy Sprint for Now program, and we did a lot of work there, helping and educating first-time home buyers and folks in that area, because there's a lot of people that get into buying a house but don't really know the true overall cost of doing that, right? A lender is going to tell you qualify for this much, so you think I'm going to go for this much, but that's not incorporating some of the other bills you got to take into consideration. So I think finding ways to create incentives for first-time home buyers, and affordable pathways to home ownership. The other thing that we don't really talk about a lot is Springfield is expected to take a lot of, how do I say it? We created most of the housing and initiatives, particularly affordable housing within Springfield. But we've got to look at other communities to step up as well, right? To create that, right? One of the things when I was working at the state is, the governor put out a policy that said any community that was receiving, that had an MBTA stop or a line, you had to do more to create affordable housing within your communities. And I think that is something that we could look to in terms of, but that's working with the state folks, because it shouldn't be just Springfield. It shouldn't be just Holyoke trying to come up with all the housing solutions. There's other communities around us that have a plethora of resources that should also be helping accommodate that, because then that it's a supply and demand issue that then, makes it more affordable at some point when other folks are opening up those doors as well. And the other piece is there are programs like through Mass Housing that has, there's an equitable business development program that's working with diverse contractors and developing, affordable housing units. So I think that's another cool thing we can do, is a lot of our skilled folks that live here in Springfield taking advantage of some of these programs that the state and the federal government have to not only help to create more affordable housing, but create pathways for wealth for people that live in the city as well.
Okay, good stuff. As you further your development, and hopefully if you get on city council, I want to hear you talk a little bit more about the folks who have homes and trying to figure out ways of keeping those homes.
That's fair.
But everything you said is spot on. No argument, no pushback. So I'm gonna keep it moving. Public safety. Public safety is a top priority for any community. We know that. How do you plan to work with the city council, the mayor's office, our state legislators, and even Congressman Neal to ensure that the families of Springfield feel safe and secure? How do we improve public safety in Springfield? How do we address the root cause of crime, social deviancy, and all the other little pieces that come along with it?
No, I think it's the biggest piece is community relationships, right? Is continuing to improve upon the community relations, not only with law enforcement, but with city government as well. I was fortunate enough to, be part of that original North NC3 initiative. And I learned a lot about that, through the work of working with different stakeholders. So I would say continuing to improve on the community relations. I also think that, a lot of this, you're not gonna police your way out of a lot of this stuff. I think you can add more police officers, but I think law enforcement is a reactive measure. And yes, it can be proactive in certain initiatives, but it's also reactive. And so when you talk about root causes, what are the root causes, right? There's a lot of mental health. There's a lot of, we talked about economic development. There's a lot of folks, jobs is an answer, right? You give somebody a job and an opportunity to grow and, expand. I think somebody said it best to me, is like, if a kid has a job, he's probably gonna be too tired to get into trouble after. And that's making an assumption that all kids are getting in trouble, which is not fair either. Right. But I think jobs is an answer. And I think, we've got to look at, the mental health. I think the mental health has been the big buzzword ever since COVID. And I think, there are a lot of organizations that are out there that I want to learn from. There's the BHNs of the world. There's all these, organizations that particularly focus on mental health. And we've got a lot to learn about, what those root causes actually are. And I think that I want to understand more, and working with government, working with the folks that are getting local funding and state funding and federal funding. What are you doing with those dollars you're getting? Right, because we need to be working towards a goal to make sure that whether it's an economic issue, a job issue, if it's a daycare issue, if it's straight up mental health issue, I think we've got to look at all those circumstances. But I would also love to, somebody used the term at one of the forums, asset mapping. I said audit, but I like the term asset mapping better. But we need to understand, what our communities are lacking and what we need, right? And we need to look at it neighborhood by neighborhood. There's a reason why, East Forest Park, 16 acres, thrives in a certain way, and there's a reason why some of these other neighborhoods are not doing as well, right? And so we need to figure out what is that, right? Forest Park, does it have a youth center, right? There's youth centers in other sections, but does Forest Park actually have one? Right. So the little things like that, I'd love to see some asset mapping and then going from there, to kind of try to address that. But community relations, public safety, training, those are all things that people can say, in terms of public safety.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate your response. Next segment will be education. Understanding that you are running to be a member of the Springfield City Council and not the Springfield School Committee.
Correct.
But if you talk, when it comes down to families and what they're dealing with in terms of their young people, they're not trying to differentiate between who does what. All they know is I
Correct.
voted for you. I need someone to advocate for me. So education plays a pivotal role in our future, as with any other municipality. What strategies will you advocate for from the city council table to improve our public schools to ensure that all children receive a quality education?
That's a great question. I appreciate the preface of the school committee thing, because I mean, at the end of the day, city council is whether you're city council or school committee, you're an advocate for your community, right? So, I mean,
Right.
you're going to get calls about an issue. So, I want to make sure that our kids are having, the all around education they should be having. I think the things we're lacking right now are arts, right? And that's a big thing. I think our kids are not getting. We're not getting the financial literacy pieces. I also think we should be teaching our kids more about, entrepreneurship and some of the stuff that, you were working on with ABVP, because not every kid is going to go to college and wants to get a job. Some kids want to go create a business. And so I think we need to start teaching our children to also have that, you can go to college, but you can also be working on your own business too and making wealth for yourself and your family and teaching them how to do that. So I'd love to see that more. But in terms of, education, you're being an advocate for our parents. I mean, the same way we were when we were at the mayor's office, we get calls from a parent. It's like, I had this issue. All right, how can I connect you to the resources is the biggest piece.
Right.
Is most people
Absolutely.
don't know where the resources are at. And so I think for me is being an advocate and connecting folks to the resources.
And serving as an access point. You talk about preparing young people for entrepreneurialism. When I was in middle school 105 years ago, we had home ec, which they taught us how to sew, cook. We did all that stuff. This is in middle school. And then we learned trades. We learned about carpentry, drafting. We learned all types of trades from sixth grade to the eighth grade. And then we could continue it once we got to high school. In terms of giving people options, but they eliminated a lot of that programming. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I think is beneficial for the folks that I went to school with. So I think that's a great option, and no one has mentioned that. And I think that's awesome.
I think the trades is a big piece, and I've mentioned this at a couple of forums now, right? Because like I'm, fortunate to be a first generation college student. My story is I applied to one school because I didn't think college was for me. I didn't think I was college material. I was working at McDonald's at the time. Worked at McDonald's for 4 years. I was like, I'm going to graduate from high school and I'm going to be a manager at McDonald's. Like that literally was my thought process. And it wasn't until I was my senior year, I'm at the guidance counselor's office dropping off something. And I see all these acceptance letters for all my my peers. I'm like, holy crap, what am I doing? Right. Long story short, applied to school, I graduated. But some of our kids don't want to go to college. And so we got to stop making them feel bad and say, well, if you don't go to college, what are you going to do with yourself? Like, no, there's the trades. Like we've got a shortage of plumbers. We got a shortage of electricians. Like, why are we also not simultaneously pushing that? Right. I wanted to go to Putnam when I was in middle school. I was like, Mom, I want to go to Putnam because I want to take carpentry. My mom would not let me go to Putnam to save my life at the time because she's like, oh, your cousins are there and they're not doing great. So I went to Central. Love Central. But the trades is an option that we should be pushing. And
absolutely,
there's a reason why Putnam has a waiting list now. Brand new school, they're doing great. There's a waiting list. So there's a need there, and we've got to fill that need. So the trades is one thing that I would really love to see us push more.
Okay, appreciate that. Next one, infrastructure. Springfield's infrastructure needs attention. Some areas of the city, they receive all the attention. Some neighborhoods, like if you drive through Indian Orchard, some sections of Pine Point, the Outer Belt, infrastructure not so great in terms of trash pickup, plowing during the winter times, curb cuts, little things like road repaving. I remember it took Eastern Ave almost 5 years to be paved. Meanwhile, Plumtree Road was paved about 5 times. So as we talk about infrastructural issues, as the city council, how will you prioritize infrastructure improvements and, work along with the administration and the rest of your fellow city councilors to fund these projects?
It'd be a similar, question or answer that I gave you last time, right? Is assessing the needs, right? And seeing where are we at and where are the list, and making sure that, all right, if we targeted this neighborhood this year for sidewalks, then this neighborhood's got to be next, right? I mean, when we were at City Hall, I think the average time for sidewalks was what, like 7 years was a waiting list, which is wild.
Right.
And it's not fair that, you know, folks have to wait that long. But not understanding, you know, what that costs and all that, you know, I definitely want to make sure, if, you know, if I get on city council, check that budget and make sure that we're advocating for every neighborhood to get that, right. And it shouldn't be just the select few that get the beautification, because, you know, we've got some other great resources and bones in some of our other neighborhoods. And if we're not keeping them up, then how are we expecting them to prosper and develop and bring new businesses and bring folks that want to, you know, shop and spend money in these businesses? So I'm with you on that. I think one of the biggest infrastructure things, you know, I would love to see, you know, for the whole city is the West East Rail. I think West East Rail, or some people call it East West Rail, I think that's going to be a huge connector for some of our folks to get jobs and opportunities that are not in the city currently. And so I think that'll be a big boost. But when you talk about the individual neighborhoods, I want to make sure that we're paying attention not just to downtown Springfield, but to the economic centers of each neighborhood. I mean, Mason Square has its own hub of business, right? Indian Orchard has its own Main Street and hub of businesses. So we got to make sure that we're working to make sure that we have a plan to address those.
Okay, good point. I like the way you say West East. Springfield first, and then we go to Boston, not Boston to us, because, you know, we're Springfield. I'm in Atlanta, but I'm like, we still Springfield, right? Next one, I think you've alluded to it. You talked about, so I call it capacity mapping. We talked about capacity mapping in terms of mapping the capacities of each and every neighborhood, 17 beautiful neighborhoods in the city.
Correct.
And we have over 152,000 people. I think it might be at 154. I'm not quite sure what those numbers are. Some folks have left, some people have moved in. In terms of community engagement, it's vital for effective governance. I'm just kind of curious as to what initiatives you'll promote to enhance community involvement in decision making and ensure that residents' voices are heard. And before you answer, giving you an example, most city council meetings are only attended by people who have city council business. And, you know, I remember there was one incident, you know, I was involved in when we had over 200 people show up for a city council meeting. And councils were complaining, well, you know, why are you here now? Where are you guys every day? You need to be at every meeting. The reality is you have to engage people to get them in. So what are your plans to make sure that we, again, 17 neighborhoods, over 150,000 people, what are your plans? You can't get to everybody, but what are your plans to ensure that community engagement takes place so that people know what's happening around the city council table and they know what issues they need to be involved in? And also extend invitations so that people feel comfortable going to a city council meeting and getting involved?
That's a great question. Got to think about that for a little bit. I mean, to me, community engagement is the number one thing, right? We have a city of 155,000, whatever we want to say, 1,000 residents. I would say nearly 100,000 of that are registered voters, which is wild to believe. But yet we probably get less than 10% that vote on a given year. So there's obviously some type of disconnect, and not all residents are feeling engaged or whatnot. I mean, I, for one, would love to see more communication come out in different communication mediums being used for our residents. I would love to see more of this stuff hit in our local radio stations, our social media, obviously. But there are a bunch of folks in our community that aren't even being engaged with. I mean, we've got a very, how do I say it? Obviously, we have a very diverse community, but not all folks speak English, right? We got folks, obviously, you got folks that speak Spanish, but you got folks that, you know, are in our Asian community. You got folks that are coming from Somalia. Like, I honestly think we should be looking at some type of office, call it Office of Immigrant Affairs, Office of something. How do we engage those folks that are residents here, you know, and how do we engage them so that they're part of this process, right? And I think that's a communication thing I think we should be fixing, right? Because not everybody speaks English. The second piece is engaging with those folks that are here, honestly, I wanna, hit the different neighborhoods and kind of ask residents what do they think? What are the mediums that they pay attention to? Because I can't just sit there and assume that they're all on Facebook or on Instagram or on TikTok. Like, what are the mediums that people are using, and how do we make sure we invest in putting that information out there? People talk about town halls. I'll try to do the town hall thing too, man. Bring some of the meetings to the neighborhood. Not everybody can make it to downtown. Plus, a lot of folks can't park, right? So how do we bring that show on the road? I mean, right now we have a lot of meetings that are done with virtual and hybrid and whatnot, but we should be trying to get it to the different neighborhoods. I mean, we've got neighborhood councils as well that we need to utilize. But I'd love to see that hit the road and hit the different communities. I mentioned the marketing campaign. That marketing campaign is not just for outside the city, but I think inside the city, we've got to find a way to engage internally.
Right.
Because there's a lot of great things that are happening in the city too, and a lot of times people don't know about them.
Right.
And so, how do we connect that? How do we, connect that missing link there? I mean, we used to talk about, you do the Indie Soul Festival or you do some of the other, poetry stuff that you were doing. How do we engage more folks, not just to go out to Connecticut or Boston and visit, those establishments, but how do we get them and connect with them to visit the establishments here? So I think we've got to do a better job of letting folks know of all the really great things that we have going on top of the engagement with government.
Absolutely. All right, man. I'm not gonna take up all your time. That was our
Oh
last
man,
segment. This is the wrap
this
up.
is good, man. Although I felt like this was like a lightning round, man.
It kind of
Um,
reminded me of the conversations we would have when we were sitting side by side in the mayor's office, like just right into it. So I want to thank you for sharing your insights on all these critical issues that Springfield is facing. And before we wrap up, please tell our listeners how they can get involved in your campaign and how they can support your vision for the great city of Springfield.
no, I appreciate that. If folks want to learn more about me, I have a website. It's joseforspringfield.com. You can do FOR Springfield, or you can do the number 4, Jose4Springfield.com. I'm also on, Facebook and Instagram. You can, contact my email, Jose@joseforspringfield.com, or just hit up D. D knows how to get a hold of me as well. But listen, for me, I don't have all the answers, right? And part of this journey that I've been on so far is listening to what folks have to say. And there are a lot of great ideas out there that aren't being heard. And the one thing I would also like to say is we need to do this together. One of the things that this city has done a lot of is we've got a lot of different organizations that are doing different things or similar things, but doing it in silos. And I feel like if we came together with all the resources we have, we could accomplish so much more. And me from my time at City Hall, like I just want to see my people move forward. I want to see our community move forward, but I want to see it done together. Let's knock down these silos. Let's knock down. I'm not about the divisive politics and stuff like that. Like I'm like, how do we work together? Because at the end of the day, we all want a great city. We want great neighborhoods, safe schools, and we want to make sure our folks, prosper. And I want to make sure my kids that I'm raising, I got 2 kids that I'm raising in the city. I want to make sure that they have the opportunities as well, because I didn't grow up with these opportunities I've had. I had to, bust my butt to get here, right? I didn't grow up with a father that was head of police or this and that and all those connections in the world. I think I might have mentioned it, but I graduated with my bachelor's degree and couldn't get a job to save my life. And it took me meeting somebody to connect me and open this door that before that point wasn't available to me. So, when you asked me earlier, why are you running for office? I'm running for office because I want to make sure that like all of our folks in our community that want to, move ahead, that they all have those opportunities and they all have the ability to get those resources and that information that I didn't have until now. And so for me is you shouldn't be connected just to be able to get a job. Like if you want a job, you should be able to, like, that door should be open. And so what I want to be is somebody who opens that door or makes it not even a door, make it a whole, whatever, whatever metaphor you want to throw there, but I think that's what I'm about. I'm the kid that busting my ass to get here, and I want to make sure that nobody should have to know somebody to get an opportunity in this city, and that's part of the reason why I'm running is because I want to make sure that everybody has that chance. So,
all right, man, I appreciate your responses, your insight, and the information you shared. It's a great way to get Springfield involved. Involvement is everything. An informed population is an educated population. It's not about the college degrees you have behind it. So I make sure folks are informed, educated, so they can make healthy decisions. Thank you, Jose, for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your patience. And I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in to One on One with D.Moss. I appreciate the folks who, every time we hit the virtual pages, they're watching the videos, and I really appreciate that. So we'll be back with more insightful discussions of the issues that matter most to our community, no matter where you go, you lay your hat. With that being said, this is One on One with D.Moss. Jose Delgado, he's running for Springfield City Council. You can visit his website at joseforspringfield.com. Please make sure you support the candidates who support you. That being said, Jose, thank you so much for your time, man.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for this forum. And make sure you vote. Regardless if you vote for me or not, make sure you vote. There's 10% of the population that's making the decisions that impact us for the next 5 to 10 years. So whether you vote for Delgado or for somebody else, please go out and vote.
There it is. All right, y'all.